What happens when trade wars backfire? In life, there's something called cause and effect. If someone punishes you, you will most likely want to respond, especially if you're physically capable. This principle doesn't just apply to individuals, it also applies to entire nations. Right now, the United States is learning this the hard way. The 10% tax imposed on China is backfiring spectacularly, creating a trade war with unintended consequences. This is not the China of 1990 or even 2010. Today, China stands as the world's largest manufacturing and industrial economy. In many ways, it has surpassed the United States. What was once thought to be a brilliant strategy, Trump's so-called four-dimensional chess, is now unraveling in real time. In response to U.S. tariffs, Beijing has struck back by imposing a 10% levy on American automobiles imported into China. This is a significant blow to automakers like General Motors, Ford, and even European manufacturers like Mercedes, who rely on the Chinese market for sales. The overall import tax on US-made heavy-engine automobiles has now reached 25%, making American vehicles prohibitively expensive for Chinese consumers. The real impact of a 10% tariff at first glance, a 10% tariff might not seem like a death sentence. However, when it comes to automobile manufacturing, such an increase can be the equivalent of an outright ban. The cost of producing cars in the United States is already significantly higher than in China. The reasons are straightforward. Higher labor costs. US workers are paid significantly more than their Chinese counterparts. Expensive supply chains. American automakers rely on supply networks that are costly and less efficient. Rising energy prices. The cost of electricity in the US has gone up, adding to manufacturing expenses. Automation in China. Chinese factories are highly automated, using advanced robotic solutions to drive down production costs. China has spent decades refining its manufacturing capabilities. Their automobile factories are not just competitive, they are world-class. This is why Chinese automakers can produce high-quality vehicles at a fraction of what Western automakers spend. Trump's tariff strategy, rather than protecting the U.S. auto industry, is effectively cutting off a vital revenue stream for American car companies. The domino effect on U.S. automakers. During his campaign, Trump told American auto workers, "If I don't win, you will have no auto industry within 2 to 3 years. It'll all be gone." Ironically, his own policies are accelerating that very outcome. By restricting U.S. automakers' access to the Chinese market, he is making it harder for them to compete globally. If exports to China decline, profits for American automakers will follow. This in turn will result in layoffs, factory closures, and an overall decline in the U.S. auto sector. Consider this. In 2024, American automakers like Ford and General Motors exported more than $3 billion worth of vehicles to China. By imposing tariffs, China is effectively shutting its doors to American cars. And the numbers are staggering. China's domestic automobile sales surpassed 22 million units last year. This is the largest automobile market in the world, far exceeding demand in the US, with global brands like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes. Setting up manufacturing plants in China, the market has plenty of supply. Meanwhile, local Chinese brands like BYD and NIO are also capturing significant market share. The bottom line, even if American cars disappear from China, most Chinese consumers won't notice. On the other hand, US automakers will feel the loss immediately. Ford, for example, could lose over $2 billion in earnings in 2025. Their stock price has already fallen by 19% in the past year. Add quality control issues into the mix, and Ford's position becomes even more precarious. China's strategic economic warfare. China's response to US tariffs isn't just about cars. This is part of a broader economic strategy to weaken American manufacturing while strengthening its own economy. Over the years, the US has been focused on foreign wars and overseas interventions, while China has quietly built an economic fortress. China has already moved to limit U.S. access to rare earth minerals, which are essential for high-tech industries. Any increase Tariffs on U.S. LNG and coal exports, hurting American energy companies, strengthen domestic manufacturing to reduce dependence on Western suppliers. The impact of these moves is significant. Today, Chinese automakers account for 32% of global vehicle production, while the United States contributes just 11%. For perspective, China's automobile exports have exploded from less than 1 million per year to over 5 million, surpassing Japan as the world's largest vehicle exporter. The cost of steel tariffs as, if the automobile tariffs weren't enough, Trump also announced a 25% tariff on global steel imports. Nations such as Japan, Canada, and Germany, which export steel to the US, are now facing penalties. But the key question remains, who actually pays for these tariffs? The answer is simple: the American consumer. When U.S. automakers pay more for steel, they pass that cost down to buyers. Here's what this means in real numbers. The U.S. imports over $23 billion worth of steel annually. A 25% tariff means U.S. automakers must pay significantly more for materials. Cars in the U.S. will become hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars more expensive, since an average car requires nearly a ton of steel and a substantial amount of aluminum. This tariff will push prices higher across the board. The consumer burden for American households already struggling with inflation. This is bad news. Owning a car has never been more expensive, and prices continue to rise. Used car prices are up 40% since 2020. Maintenance and repair costs have increased by 30%. Car insurance premiums have surged by 29%. Even simple car parts now cost 20% more than they did a few years ago. The additional cost from Trump's tariffs, estimated at $1,500 per car, is another burden on middle-class Americans. For many families, that represents a full month's worth of savings. Will Trump's trade war get worse? Trump is unpredictable, and his trade policies could escalate further. What happens if he decides to impose new tariffs on Mexico and Canada? General Motors and Ford both manufacture a significant number of vehicles in North America. If Trump penalizes these imports, costs will rise even more. In theory, more cars would be built in the US, but at much higher prices. The cost of a new car could rise by more than $6,000, making American-made vehicles even less competitive on the global market. China's growing advantage. While the US struggles with rising costs, China is moving forward. BYD, one of China's leading automakers, is integrating AI-powered smart driving technology into its vehicles. Their manufacturing costs are lower, their supply chains are stronger, and they're gaining market share worldwide. This is why Trump's trade war is counterproductive. Simply imposing tariffs without addressing underlying economic weaknesses does not help American workers. In the end, the real losers are U.S. consumers, who will be forced to pay higher prices while China continues to dominate the global automobile industry. The world is changing fast. If the U.S. doesn't rethink its strategy, it risks losing even more ground to China, not just in the auto industry, but across the entire manufacturing sector.